If you're buying your first home, these are the 16 biggest mistakes that I've seen first-time homebuyers make. And 16 is my favorite, of course. I'm a little biased. My name's Wayne Turner. I've been brokering the seller real estate for nearly 30 years, and I've seen so many first-time homebuyers make these mistakes. The really cool thing, it's not expensive to avoid these mistakes. So I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do to avoid these 16 biggest mistakes that I see first-time homebuyers make. Number one is not pulling your credit. You want to pull your credit, and you want to pull what they call a tri-merge credit report. Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Those are the three credit bureaus, and you want to look at all three of those. You want to make sure your credit score is a 620 or higher. If you have a 620 or higher credit score, you can purchase a house. If you're in what they call a rural development, RD area, you can purchase a house with a 620 credit score, 2 years on the job, and yes, you only need $1,000. So the second biggest mistake people make is not getting approved. They'll get qualified, they'll talk to a lender on the phone, but they're not approved. Now the difference is, an approval is when they pull your credit. That lender actually pulls your credit, they verify income, they look at bank statements, they verify your tax returns, they look at your income, they look at your monthly debts, and they will tell you, yes, you are approved for a mortgage based on this payment. And then they'll show you based on that payment what price of home you need to be looking for. The third biggest mistake we see homebuyers making is not getting a home inspection on the property. A home inspector they'll look at the foundation, they'll look under the crawl space, they're looking for mold, mildew, they're looking for anything that may be potentially wrong with the property, and then they will address those with you, and you can address those with the property owner that you're buying the property from, and you can negotiate to have those items fixed before you move into the home. So always get a home inspection. The fourth biggest mistake we see people making is purchasing a property without a home warranty. Now, if it's a new constructed property, it's going to be under that contractor's warranty. But if it's a pre-existing home, most people don't realize you can get the seller to pay for you a warranty that covers that property for 1 full year, and it's renewable after that. So you can renew it at your cost. They only run anywhere from $700 to $800. The seller will pay for that for you, and it covers all the components on the property. The last thing you want to do is purchase a home, close on the home, go lay your head in bed at night. It's your first home. You're going to have a little apprehension. You're going to be a little stressed. The last thing you want to know is, what if something breaks and I got to come out of pocket $6,000 or $7,000? With a home warranty on the property, you typically only pay a $75 to $100 service call, and that's pretty much it. They'll fix the item. No stress. Now the fifth mistake we see people make, and this one is overlooked. Now the first four, they're like, yeah, I want to get a home inspection, got to get approved. Yeah, we get all that, Wayne. But number 5 is this, and that's to ask for specific things in the property that you want. If it's on a big piece of land, you can ask for the tractor. There's nothing wrong with that. But keep in mind that doesn't add any monetary value to the property. But you also have to look at, well, what about the curtains? What about the drapes? What about the appliances? Will the refrigerator stay? It doesn't matter if they say they're going to stay. It doesn't matter if it's in the MLS, that realtor database. If it says the refrigerator is going to stay, you still want to write it in just to be on the safe side. Write in the appliances that you want. We see so many people get upset because you move into the home, the refrigerator's gone. You move into the home and the speakers are taken off the wall that were mounted and built in. All of that is pre-written in the contract. Unfortunately, you have to read the contract as a buyer, and the sellers have to read the contract as a seller, because they'll take items like that, and then you're left frustrated. Always ask. When in doubt, ask, put that in writing with the offer that all of those items will remain with the property. Not just the items that will remain with the property, but also the items that you won't remove from the property. So if there's something in the backyard, an old swing set, dilapidated stuff, a junk car, whatever it may be, you can also ask that the seller remove those items before the closing. Now, number 6, and this one can save you a lot of money, is get an insurance quote, but get more than one quote. If you bundle your insurance, as they call it, with your automobile and your mortgage, then more than likely you'll get a discount on that. But it's okay to get 2 or 3 quotes. They're going to ask you information on the property. What's it constructed of? Brick? What kind of roof is it? How many bedrooms? How many baths? What's the square footage? And then you can also ask the insurance provider, what would that quote be? Now, what would that monthly premium or yearly premium be if you, in fact, had a higher deductible? Let's say instead of $250, you went from $500. Instead of $500, you went to $1,000. And then you can make your best educated decision, because if you have $12,000, $15,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 sitting around, you may be okay and comfortable with $1,000 deductible on your automobile insurance and $1,000 deductible on your homeowner's insurance, and in doing so can save you substantially over the yearly cost of your insurance. Now, number 7 is not testing the water. And believe it or not, there's a lot of property sold around the United States, and they have a well on the property. So you not only want to make sure that the water is tested if you have a well, but you also want to make sure that the pump and everything is not leaking and working to its intended function. Most water pressure wells have to be around 60 to 70 psi. That means pounds per square inch. That pump on that well has to maintain that pressure, so when you turn on the faucet in your home, you get consistent water pressure. So what happens is that pump cycles on and cycles off. You may have a 300 to 400 or 500 dug well, but that pump is actually pulling water up, holding it in a tank, and then pressurizing it to your property. So you want to make sure there's no Ebola or E. coli or anything that in the water, but you also want to make sure that the well pump is working to its intended function. Now, number 8 is buying a home without getting the septic system inspected. Now, a lot of properties are connected to city water and city sewer. Some properties have a septic tank, a septic system on the property, and you want to make sure that that septic system is working properly to its intended function. And you also want to make sure that the environmental office in the local county or parish that the property's residing in that you're purchasing will come out and look at that property, and they'll give you a certificate. They'll give the seller a certificate. You get the certificate that says everything's in good working order on the property. And look, oftentimes the septic systems are in good working order, but it's not a bad thing to have the seller give you a receipt showing that it's been pumped within the last 2 years. And if it hasn't been pumped in the last 2 years, why not just go ahead and ask them to pump the septic system? It'll run them $350 to $500 depending on the size of the system, but at least you know when you move into the property the septic system's been pumped and you're starting with an empty septic tank that's in good working order, and once again, peace of mind. Now, number 9 is getting the property appraised. You want to make sure that you get the property appraised. And listen, if you're getting a mortgage on the property, the mortgage company is going to require that the property be appraised because they're loaning you money on an asset, and they want to make sure that the property's value is there. So they want to look at the copy of the contract. They're going to send somebody out. That person's a certified appraisal. They will rubber stamp it and say this is the value on that property. If the value is actually less than what you're purchasing the property for, you never want to be disconcerted about that, because you can always negotiate with the seller to come down on the price of the property to meet the appraised value. Now, if you're paying cash for the property, it's not a bad thing to pay to have it appraised, but it's not necessarily something that you have to do, but you want to make sure that you see comparable sold properties within the last 3 months within a 3-mile radius of that property, and a good real estate agent will take care of that for you. Now, number 10 is something that really a lot of people overlook, and that's a title policy. You want to make sure that you get a title policy on the property, and the purpose of that title policy and title insurance is to make sure there's no liens, back taxes, or encumbrances on the property. In other words, no one has any interest whatsoever in that property, and that title policy will cover you and the lender. It's called simultaneous issue. So oftentimes people get a policy and it will cover the lender, but you want to make sure it covers you, the property owner, as well as the lender. That way, no one's going to come knocking on your door and say, hey, I own a piece of this property. Jimmy, who owned it before me, said I could have it. It's like, no, dude, you're out. I have a title policy, and it really depends on the state. Some states, the seller pays for title policy. Some states and areas, counties, the buyer pays for title policy. You just have to ask a good real estate agent who pays for title policy. And a good mortgage lender in your area will also know to tell you who's going to pay for that title policy. However, you must know that you can ask for closing costs to be paid, and closing costs typically run 3.5%. They almost always run 3.5% of your loan amount. In other words, what are you buying a property for? Less your down payment on the property, and that is what your closing cost is going to be based off of. The seller can pay all of your closing costs, and if you have to pay for title in your county, parish, state, then that can be included in the closing cost that the seller pays for you. Now, number 11 can be a mistake if you're buying any sort of a land, if it's over really an acre, even a half acre. But a lot of times when you're in the inner city, it's a small area, it's not necessarily, but you want to get a survey. When in doubt, get a survey. And you can always ask the seller to pay for you a survey. Oftentimes that survey's been done on that property before the structure was ever put there. But as time goes on, if it's a piece of property that's 30, 40, 60 years, then people can encroach upon that property. And what a surveyor will do is they'll go out at the property. There's pins, there's metal rods in the ground on the property lines. They'll go out and find those pins, locate those pins. They can stake the property off so you can see your property lines. And oftentimes they'll tell you, okay, that fence is 3 feet over, or this person's doghouse or this shed, they're encroaching upon your property. So you want to make sure you get that and clarify those things and clear those things up before you take possession of the property. It's so much easier to have the seller do it as opposed to you having to do it after you've already bought the home. Now, number 12, and we see this all the time, and that's when people go to purchase a property, they buy a property, they close on the home, and they have not seen the restrictive covenants. They have not seen the deed restrictions and the homeowners association covenants. They haven't seen a copy of that. You need to look at a copy of that and make sure, because people, the biggest thing we see is they buy a house, they close on the home, and then they were told they could put in a shed, and now they can't put in a shed. They were told they could paint the garage door blue, now they can't paint the garage door blue. They were told that the house had rear yard access with double gates in the MLS, and it looked great, and we can park the boat there, and then you got to knock at the door, and it says, no, you cannot park your boat there. So you want to make sure you get a copy of the restrictive covenants that show whether or not you can have a boat, what color you can paint. Is there an architectural planning committee? You want to make sure before you close on that property, you want to make sure you scan through those documents and you're comfortable with what they say. All right, number 13, and this one is overlooked. Like literally this one is overlooked so easy, and it's mineral rights. A lot of people don't realize, but if you buy a piece of property, you typically keep your mineral rights, but you just never know in the fine print when the seller says, oh, I'll sell you the property, but I'm going to maintain the mineral rights. So for example, go with me. You live on the Gulf Coast, and there's a lot of oil around here. So if you were to buy a piece of property, it would be 50 acres, 10 acres, 100 acres of land, even 1 acre of land. You want to make sure that not only do you buy that property, but you own the rights from the ground down. Those are mineral rights. So if there's oil in the ground or anything like that, it is yours. The last thing you want to do is close on a piece of property. You've bought it, the seller kept the mineral rights, and all of a sudden they send you a letter, knock on your door and give you notice, hey, we're going to do some digging because we think there's oil in your backyard. Don't want that. Always make sure you get your mineral rights with every property you purchase. Number 14 is the flood zone. It's okay to check the flood zone. You can literally go to the FEMA maps, put in the property address, and it will tell you which flood zone that property's in. Listen, A is when it's a higher flood zone. B, it's when it's in a little bit lower. C is when it's in a little bit lower. And X is when it's basically not considered to be in a flood zone. Listen, if you live along the coast, whether it be South Carolina, whether it be North Carolina, the state of Florida, the Gulf Coast, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Louisiana, you name it, we're all up and around, and even all up north. All of these areas are in flood zones, but it just depends on what zone the property is. So you want to make sure that you're in flood zone A, B, C, X, or not in a flood zone at all. If you're in flood zone A, chances are that property is going to flood within 30 to 40 years. There's no guarantee, but there's also no guarantee that it won't flood within 30 to 40 years. Number 15 is one of those things where people overlook it. They're like, well, Wayne, I don't have kids. But what if you're going to have kids? What if you inherit a kid? Yeah, I said inherit a kid. Or you adopt a kid. Whatever it may be, it's not a bad idea to check the sexual offenders list. You can check to see, are there any sexual offenders that currently live in that area? Not so much own a home, but actually currently live in that area. Not just sexual offenders, but you can check with your local county as well as your local city to see, are there any halfway houses or anything like that in the area that you may not feel comfortable having your children be around. And finally, as promised, my favorite, number 16. And the mistake that people make is not asking the proper questions, not asking their agent, how many years have you been in the business? How many transactions did you do last year or the year before? And know this, it doesn't cost you any money to have a real estate agent work for you on your behalf. Real estate agents are paid when you have an agent working for you. They're paid from the listing company. The company who has a property listed has negotiated with the seller a fee for their service. And in return, that listing agent puts the property into the MLS, the multiple listing service, that realtor database, and they disclose to an agent, this is what we would pay an agent if they brought a buyer for this property. And so that's how agents get paid. When they show the property, you find one you like, you write the contract, you close on that property, they're compensated a portion of the commission that the seller is paying the listing company. Doesn't cost you anything to have an agent work for you and represent you. So I hope you found value in this video. My goal is to help millions of people to better understand the process of buying and selling real estate. So give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, comment below, and let us know if there's a video topic that you want to hear more about. In the meantime, have fun, no worries.